Hello, role-playing people! In this episode of the podcast, I want to ask you something. How do you introduce the player characters to the game? I ask this question because we all want believable, flavorful, authentic, and original protagonists. Ideally, the character is not only a pleasure to play, but also a pleasure to observe, discover, and interact with for the other players. From my experience, if you isolate characters from their backgrounds and backstories, leaving the players to introduce them only through conversation, it doesn't really do the trick. If you also do session 0, maybe you discuss the characters in more detail during that time, but if the player reveals too much, it reduces the amount of character discovery the others can do throughout the game. At our table, session 0 tends to be pretty abstract, going into archetypes and expectations for the game more than actual character talk. So then, how do we make the best of both worlds? Well, here's how we've been doing things for a few games now with great success. Each player prepares an introductory scene or set of scenes that best represent what their character is about. In collaboration with the storyteller, we bring these moments to life, showcasing the character's personality, abilities, desires, flaws, backgrounds, and hidden little secrets that might not really come to the surface through direct interaction with other characters. Once those moments play out and we know who our protagonists are, the storyteller is free to bring them together and start the interaction, unless they bring each other together as a result of their backstories and motivations. So think of it as the first episode of a TV series where the protagonists are from completely different backgrounds. They will come together, of course, but until then, they have something to show about who they are, and that's fun. It's fun for the players and it's fun for the GM because it puts the character directly into the spotlight and into their stories. Sure, you can always have the characters meet up in a tavern or a bar or Elysium, or whatever other gathering place, and watch them give each other the introductory job interview. Not only is this overdone to death, but it limits the introduction to dialogue, and dialogue in this instance only gets you so far. There are many ways of showing character without talking about your traits. Just show them. Work with your storyteller and play out a little scene that says something about your character, things that make them relatable to the other players, things that make them dislikable. Your choice. In most tavern introductions, I've often heard GMs say, I'll let them get to know each other and then I'll throw something at them, like some NPCs burst through the door, caked in blood, asking for help. That's how I'll bring them together. Yes, okay, that is one way of going about things. But throwing something at the players that is completely disconnected from their characters and backstories, you are externalizing motivation. Instead of letting the protagonists pursue their own goals with each other's help, you are throwing encounters at them. So don't be surprised when they chose not to pursue that story thread, when later down the game, they're so used to you throwing stuff at them and making things interesting for them that they don't really have internal motivation. They don't know what drives their characters. They don't know how to reply to what do you want to do next. They only know how to be reactive and rely heavily on the GM to keep the game going. And from personal experience, when that starts happening, the game starts breaking down. So to counter this, and make it obvious to the player right from the start that their input matters and their character shapes the whole story, I ask the players how they want their characters to be introduced, and you'd be surprised how many interesting narrative tricks the players can come up with to show off their characters. It's a pleasure just to spectate. You know what? Let's get down to an example. During session 0, I told my group I'd be playing a character with a gambler concept belonging to the House of Spheres, Visage of Portals, for a Demon the Fallen game, and this guy has made some pretty powerful enemies, so he's afraid for his life. Simply talking about it during session 1 with the other characters in a bar doesn't really carry the weight of his struggles. It doesn't show why he is concerned about his well-being. Thus, other players might make fun, they might take this lightly, and so on. And that creates a disconnect between how I want the character to play and feel and how they are perceived at the table. So to counter this, I tell my storyteller how I want the character introduced to the game and how I'm hoping the other players see the character. And obviously, all of this is done to illustrate the character's background, flaws, abilities, and so on. Let's just call the character Jake, for no real reason. Jake is, as always, at the gambling table, surrounded by some pretty dislikable individuals. He knows some of them, he's taken their money before, and they don't seem happy to see him at the table. Their piercing, aggressive eyes are making Jake uncomfortable, so he opens the window behind him to let in some fresh air. Looking down at the street from this place, the 30th floor of a luxurious downtown skyscraper is making him feel sick. But the game goes on and the tension keeps rising as Jake keeps winning and taking people's money. Suddenly, in perfect, eerie silence, the doors to the gambling den open wide and a horde of thugs carrying baseball bats walks right in and gathers around the table. This man Jake has taken money from before throws his cards down and starts accusing Jake of being a cheat, telling him he's going to make sure his prestidigitation tricks never work again, as his fingers will be broken one by one, as will his ribs. Jake is afraid, but keeps his composure and asks to talk about the issue. In a moment of opportunity, he grabs as much money as he can off the table, and while saying some very weird sounding string of syllables, he just dives out the window from the 30th floor. Oh my. Now, if I were a storyteller, I'd actually stop the scene right here and move on to another player so as to leave people hanging. What's gonna happen? How will the character survive that fall? What I've presented just now is, of course, a sum up of the whole scene, but the storyteller will describe the scene, request roles, and talk as the NPCs, allowing Jake plenty of room to build tension and show off his personality. What needs mentioning, since not everyone listening to this podcast has played Demon the Fallen, is that sufficient knowledge of lore of portals allows a character to teleport from a portal of any type to another portal of similar type. And Jake has the visage of portals. So when I return to the player in question, I ask him to make a roll. He can spend a point of faith to ensure success. So what happens is, Jake grabs the money and dives out the window from the 30th floor of a luxurious downtown skyscraper. As his body passes through the frame, it vanishes. In another part of the city altogether, Jake flies in through his living room window and falls to the floor as $100 bills shoot up in all directions around him. He has made some pretty powerful enemies and will need help fixing this situation. Luckily, he is meeting some newcomers tomorrow at the Tyrant's court. Perhaps they will be of use. That's how we introduce Jake in a way that is interesting, captivating, meaningful, and will probably involve the other players a lot more than if Jake just shows up and goes like, "Oh, some people are out to get me, I need help." The character doesn't just talk about their struggle. They showed the struggle. They showed why it's personal and why it matters. In this example, we know that Jake has done business with people who are now his enemies. He can teleport quite successfully and escape some pretty hairy situations. He keeps his cool under pressure. He can be quite deceptive. He likes making money, and he is afraid of heights. And it feels like he is one of the protagonists, as opposed to some dude who just happened to be in the tavern at the right time and throws a quest the player's way, right? I guess what I'm saying is just consider more narrative perspectives and options when introducing protagonists. Tavern talk is the traditional way of doing it, the beaten path, and for better or for worse, it works. But there are so many options out there, and I'm not saying the way I've just presented is the best. Oh no, what I'm saying is maybe the players should take character introductions into their own hands and work with a storyteller to make the best of everyone's first session. I've said it, and I will say it again because I firmly believe it. A session is only as uneventful as the players make it and the GM allows it. Show off the characters. Show off the humble warrior taking down 3 attackers before sitting at the table of the tavern. Show off the power-hungry inhuman vampire and their abusive interactions with their ghouls. Show off the level whatever wizard who dreams big but isn't powerful enough to achieve his goal by himself. You get the point. No matter how you go about it, every character brings a story to the table. Tell that story. If you do it well, everyone is going to enjoy it. Thank you very much for listening. Do consider this point of view, or don't, your choice. And don't forget to answer though. How do you introduce the protagonists to the game? Take care, have fun, and don't forget to play.